one of the best workers and one of the nicest people ever in wrestling. Beautiful Bobby Eaton passed away yesterday at the age of 62, and I'm not going to lie to you guys, this one fucking hurts. I will do my best to keep my emotions in check. Leave your favorite Beautiful Bobby Eaton moments in the comments, please. Matches, whatever. Again, this one really fucking hurts, guys. This really does, because he was universally loved by fans, by wrestlers he worked with, by wrestlers that, were influenced by him. Everybody that met him said he was so nice and just one of the best people that you could ever hope to, interact with in wrestling. And seriously, so many of the tag team matches that he had in his career still stand out to this day. His singles runs, even when he was only given maybe 5 minutes in a TV match, even as the miles, piled onto his body and, the various, minor injuries and stuff like that, you could still see how smooth and crisp he was, and just how great and how fucking incredible it was to watch somebody that gifted, that much of a natural worker in wrestling. And his career spanned a few decades. I mean, he wrestled numerous territories. He did so much good stuff. And the fact that he was so beloved by so many people, I mean, that speaks highly to the character, to the man he was, and to just the legacy that he leaves. And it's just, this really fucking hurts. The news hit very late last night. I was actually just about to go to bed, and I saw that, and I was like, okay, oh, no, 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 not Bobby Eaton, not Bobby Eaton. But unfortunately, it is true. It is unfortunately very true. And there are various stories that you hear about Bobby Eaton, from Mick Foley to Steve Austin, and of course from Jim Cornette, because he was a member of one of the best tag teams of all time, in my personal opinion, the Midnight Express, whether with Dennis Condrey or Stan Lane. You hear about just how great Bobby Eaton was, in the ring, just how he could work with anybody, how he was a natural at it, his timing, the Alabama Jam, the rocket launcher, the moves he did off the top rope, the way he would do punches, the way he could do bumps, the way he could just take anything. He can make a guy that would obviously be below his talent level, all due respect to the opponent, and he can make them look better than they ever would with anybody else, because he was just that fucking good. I'm going to share some, stuff that I wrote down and everything, and obviously a lot of these stories I heard on Jim Cornette's podcast, because, with the Midnight Express, obviously they were in lockstep, and just, I got to send out my thoughts to, and, just everything, my, positive, as many positive thoughts as I can to his kids. His wife passed away, I believe, about 5 weeks ago, and Bobby was in, had health issues and stuff like that in the last number of years, ups and downs and stuff like that, heart issues, had a pacemaker put in, and, being married to, it was Bill Dundee's daughter. Bill Dundee, famous wrestler, Memphis Booker, Mid-South Booker, feud with Jerry Lawler, team with Jerry Lawler, and, if you're married to somebody that goddamn long, it could end up being a broken heart, and that really pains me. That pains me. Again, very few universally beloved people in wrestling like Bobby Eaton, and just, so let's talk about some memories, but I want to hear from you guys in the comments, please. He was born August 14, 1958 in Huntsville, Alabama. He started wrestling in 1976 in the NWA Mid-America territory, headed by Nick Goulas, who, you hear stories about Nick Goulas, but he did understand talent and everything, and eventually, even though he had some success there, Eaton did, that would end up kind of transitioning into more successful runs in his career. But he was, automatically people could see he was a fucking natural. He was trained by Tojo Yamamoto, who is a respected, veteran in wrestling as well. His athleticism, his abilities, his poise, and just showmanship, he could do that, but he stood out without, while also making his opponent seem good, and just seem great, because Bobby was just that giving. He was just that giving. You could see it. You could see it in the ring. While he would obviously win a lot of his matches and everything, throughout his career, yeah, there would be the drubbings and stuff like that, and the babyface teams would eventually get one over on the Midnight Express. You could always see just how great Bobby was, and just the timing, the natural ability that he had. He did get singles runs and then had a tag team run where he teamed with Leaping Lanny Poffo and won the Mid-America Tag Team Championship. Feuded with Gordy and Hayes in the very beginning of their career before they became the Freebirds. And then teamed with George Goulas, yes, Nick Goulas' son. Had singles feuds against Chris Colt and Dennis Condrey, who we'd later team up with. He had a brief heel run before the promotion closed down because dwindling ticket sales, and the fact is Nick Goulas ran off a lot of people and a lot of fans and burned a lot of bridges. But Bobby Eaton found work. Even though he wrestled a little bit in Georgia Championship Wrestling, he wrestled in Continental Wrestling Association, Memphis, and achieved a good amount of success. That is where he met Donna. And they actually kept it a secret for a bit that they were dating because Bill was like, no, you're not going to date any of those wrestlers. And once it was revealed that they were dating and everything, he pretty much gave his blessing because Bobby Eaton, again, such a nice guy. And that speaks highly to, Bill understanding how great Bobby Eaton was and also how much he knew that Bobby Eaton would take care of his daughter. And he did through, the various travel and everything. I mean, they were married in the early 80s, and the only reason their marriage ended is because of her untimely death. And, about 40 years or close to 40 years or something like that. I mean, I'm not exactly sure on the year they got married, but I mean, like, you're married to somebody that goddamn long, that's a rarity. Not just in wrestling, that's a rarity in general. And that's, soulmate, lockstep right there. They had a few kids. He teamed with Sweet Brown Sugar, the future Coco Beware, as the team New Wave. And I've seen a little bit of footage. I haven't seen enough. It is kind of interesting to see Coco Beware before he got to the WWE, how really, I mean, he really was motivated. But him and Eaton, incredible tag team. They did feud a bit and everything because of Jimmy Hart First Family, because maniacal Jimmy Hart, it was the best Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart still looks the exact same as he did in the 1980s, and I don't understand how. But they did the Stagger Lee stuff much like they did in Mid-South with JYD, in the mask and everything. But they did it with, they did it with Sweet Brown Sugar. And then, he would later lead the First Family, and then he would team up with them again. Eaton would team up with Sugar, and then they would feud with Fabulous One, Stan Lane, and Steve Keirn. Kind of interesting how he feuded with Dennis Condrey, had a series of matches with him, and then feuded with Lane, and then would end up teaming with both of them later in his career. Steve Keirn, of course, would become, Skinner, the Alligator Man. That wasn't a great gimmick, but Steve Keirn was a hell of a worker, and, him teaming with Lane, they were a great goddamn tag team. There's a match somewhere in like May or June of '83 that's floating around with them, and, it's knockdown, drag out, brawl, the Memphis crowd's going goddamn, or at least Memphis territory crowd. I'm not sure if it's in Memphis, but they're going nuts. And then later there was a talent trade between Memphis and Mid-South because Bill Watts' territory had kind of gotten a little bit stagnant, even though people appreciate it. Jerry Jarrett, and this stuff has been told on Cornette's podcast, various people came down. Terry Taylor, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express. Cornette was like, the secondary manager and stuff like that, and he got to go there with Eaton, and Eaton would be teamed with Dennis Condrey. Bill Watts had a plan. He saw potential because Condrey, I believe, had wrestled in Mid-South as well, and he respected Bobby Eaton. Once he saw footage, he was like, okay, let's get Cornette, let's package them together. So Bill Watts was smart back then when he booked them. And they had so many great feuds. They feuded with Magnum TA in Wrestling 2, and then that would turn into a program between them. They would win the tag titles. They would feud with the Rock and Roll Express, and then the Rock and Roll Express would lose a loser leave town match and go back to Memphis because Memphis business is kind of a little bit weird. So they got the Rock and Roll Express back, and then they would come back after 90 days. It was 90 days or 120 days. I think it was 90 days. And then they would go into the program with Watts and JYD. Watts would come out of retirement for the first time until the next time and the next time and the next time. And this is unfortunate when JYD wasn't in the best headspace. Things were starting to go a little bit south. But Watts would also suffer an injury, a torn hamstring or something like that, and he would, have to do some stuff. But Condrey and Eaton would bump their ass off. They got huge money from that, as you would expect. And, of course, Eaton and Condrey would do everything they could to protect Cornette, but Cornette would get bashed around as well. But Eaton would bounce around like crazy, like a fucking Super Bowl. It's amazing that he could walk by the age of like 30 with how much he bumped, but he was safe with it. He, again, was a natural at it. And then a few with the Rock and Roll Express when they came back and then did scaffold matches and they left the territory and went to World Class. And World Class, they basically feuded with the Fantastics for about 18 fucking years because let's be honest, World Class at that point, even though they were drawing some big crowds, there were a lot of things that were kind of declining. There were some big shows, but especially by '86. But they did some travel. They traveled, but it was shorter trips and everything because Mid South was a really tough territory. As far as travel, just traveling the states and stuff like that and everything, and hearing about that, I'm amazed that people didn't go absolutely insane driving, all those roads. But after having that short stay in World Class, they would achieve arguably their biggest success in Jim Crockett Promotions. They would be brought in, they would be in the Georgia territory, and that really wouldn't work out all that well. They worked with the Sawyer brothers, Bud Sawyer before he went, when he was absolutely insane, and Brett Sawyer, and a few various combinations of teams. And then the Georgia territory got folded up a whole lot quicker. They went to the Charlotte end, and from there, they were off to the goddamn races. They would, do a program at the Rock and Roll Express because I don't know if two teams ever were in lockstep like that as much as those. I mean, I'm sure there were territories, stuff like that, but I'm just talking about like lengthy runs and everything, like programs that went a couple decades and multiple territories. I mean, you think about it, Mid-South, they went to Jim Crockett Promotions. They had that stuff. If, Vince had been able to get both teams, he probably would have programmed them together for like a month and then said, well, goddamn, pal, I got to split these teams up. Such good shit. But anyway, after, they had the thing with the Rock and Roll Express, Superstars on the Superstation, that taping, Condrey and Eaton would win the tag titles. They would feud with Road Warriors and various other teams. They would have such incredible matches. Great American Bash 1986. There were a few, there were a few events that were filmed that used to be on WWE Network and now are on Peacock. I don't know if they have the Hidden Gems section yet. If so, please check that stuff out. Eaton and Condrey, incredible goddamn tag team. Condrey had wrestled in numerous territories as well, and you could tell that they just had that natural feel. And they were a great territory tag team. They were great to watch because of just the bumping machines that they were and how they could just get the crowd to goddamn hate you. But also the crowd respected them because they were so good in the ring. I mean, and Condrey was. Don't get me wrong. Eaton was just such a natural, like, it eventually got to where, after a number of years, they had to turn him babyface. More on that in a little bit. They would eventually lose the tag titles back to the Rock and Roll Express, and then they would feud with the Road Warriors. Road Warriors would go to Japan for a month. Hawk would have a cracked bone in his lower leg or something like that, and they would have a cast, something, I don't remember the exact story, but they had the scaffold match. Starrcade 1986, huge house. Huge fucking house. Also the last Starrcade they had in Greensboro. Great way to piss off those goddamn fans by taking that event away. But that's another story. Eaton and Condrey just like, oh, we're doing this and everything. Oh, we're like, what are we doing? And Eaton, I think he tweets his ankle when he dropped because, I mean, that was a high scaffold. I mean, it's amazing that something worse didn't happen. I mean, how could you not injure yourself, even as safe as Bobby Eaton is? And Dennis may have suffered some bumps. I mean, how could you not up there? But then, of course, it was a famous one where Cornette suffered the torn knee and everything. And Bubba says, Jimmy, you fell so fast. Rest in peace, Big Bubba Rogers. An absolute natural as well. But they would, they had the scaffold match. They had all these incredible matches. Great amount of money that they were making. Then early 87, and I don't know what the reasons are. It's none of my business. Dennis Condrey left due to undisclosed reasons that Cornette, Eaton, and Condrey know. And you know what? I'm not going to speculate. I don't care. As long as he was happy, that's what matters. Naturally, things get in the way. So Eaton and Cornette were like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, Stan Lane steps in. He had been wrestling, I believe, in Florida and stuff like that. And he also wrestled in, Memphis, as I had said. And he was well-traveled. He had also had an experience with the Road Warriors, where it was him and Kern, and they were in the AWA for a brief stint. And I believe the Fabulous Ones were supposed to lose the titles, or the Fabulous Ones were supposed to gain the titles from the Road Warriors, and they said, we're not going for the finish. And like Lane's like, oh, I don't want to get these guys to hurt me. And Kern's like, huh, and then they just blitz him and everything and stuff like that. So that carries over a little bit later. it's really hard to quantify which version is better because they were both great in their own ways. Condrey and Eaton, Lane and Eaton. And of course, you had Beautiful Bobby, or Loverboy Dennis and Beautiful Bobby, the Midnight Express, and then Beautiful Bobby and Sweet Stan, the Midnight Express. And with Cornette, it was just a great way to keep them as heels because naturally you have to have that manager that people want to slap, but you also have to have these workers that are so good. You want to see them get beat up. They get beat up, but they don't get beat. And that's the classic. That's something that's lost now. I'm not saying it's lost in all of wrestling, but it is lost to an extent. Now, Lane and Eaton are teaming up. They're doing some great. In the matches obviously were a little more faster paced because Condrey had a different style and everything, but both incarnations were just fucking tremendous. And they weren't even the only incarnations. There was Randy Rose, Norvell Austin, and Dennis Condrey, I believe in Memphis, if I recall correctly. And they used Here Comes the Express. I actually heard that song and I'm like, I don't see how that fit. I don't see how that fit at all. But it was great because, back then you could use licensed music, like when Championship Wrestling from Florida did that for their Battle of the Belt specials. Whew, that was funny. But anyway, the U.S. Tag Team Championships got created where basically they were belts for the Midnight Express because Dusty, who was the booker, wanted them to have belts. And he respected Bobby Eaton. He respected Dennis, but he obviously knew that Stan and Eaton could be a great team, and they were. They had a few with the Fantastics and other teams and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, but they did have a Rock and Roll Express scaffold match, which wasn't all that great. Not that the guys didn't try, but it was too much too soon. They had it at Starrcade '87. Had it been in Greensboro, it would have been better received. Chicago was a hot crowd, and then they didn't give the Road Warriors the Tag Team Championships. Again, another story for another day. But looking at what they did with the Fantastics, they'd already worked with them so much in world class. Naturally, they were going to have great matches. They put them over and gave them the U.S. Tag Team Championships for a bit. They feuded for some of the Great American Bash Tour, won the titles back at Great American Bash 1988, feuded with them a bit and everything. But the reason Dusty gave them the tag titles back is because he wanted them to feud with Arn and Tully, U.S. versus World Tag Team Championships. And Arn and Eaton were great friends. Behind the scenes, their kids had gone to school together and everything, and they just, or at least they've been over family gatherings and stuff like that. I think their kids might have gone to the same school together, but the whole point is they were natural friends. There was a chemistry. J.J. Dillon was on the side of Tully and Arn, and had that program continued, imagine just the amount of matches, the amount of money and everything that they could have done. Because the promos between JJ and Cornette and the work of Eaton and Lane and Tully and Arn. I mean, and Tully and Arn, one of the best tag teams of all time as well. I mean, fucking tremendous. Whether they were the Brain Busters, it doesn't matter. They were so fucking good. So, unfortunately, that ends up going a little bit tits up due to payoff issues with Jim Crockett and the eventual sale to TBS. And I'm sure other things. Tully and Arn go to WWE. They lose the tag titles in, I believe it was Philadelphia, I believe. September 10th, 1988. And then the Midnight Express are the U.S. and World Tag Team Champions. They relinquish the U.S. tag titles, and those go kind of, among various teams for a bit. And then Dusty says, okay, I'm going to turn the Road Warriors heel, which nobody wanted to boo the Road Warriors, and they glom Eaton and then beat up Lane and stuff like that. And they just beat up everybody. They just beat up everybody. And then they go into a program with the original Midnight. Not Norvell, Condrey, and Rose, but Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey. And because they were working in the AWA, managed by Paul E. This was Paul E. Dangerous before he became Paul Heyman. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman. But that was a feud that should have worked. It was great. At one point where, they make their debut in Jim Crockett Promotions, or, WCW, because I think by that point Ted Turner had bought the company. Cracks Cornette over the head. He bleeds. Eaton gets laid out, beat up, and stuff like that. And then for a bit, Eaton sells his injuries and stuff like that. Lane competes in some, singles matches. And then they have the match. I want to say Starrcade 88. And then they just kind of gave up on doing it. Jim Crockett took over, rest in peace, Jim Crockett Jr. He took over, and basically he wasn't he wasn't a fan of Randy Rose's work for whatever, so now Dennis was making some shots, but not some because he was living in Colorado, I want to say he was living in, and he ended up not showing up at the Chi-Town Rumble, so they had Jack Victory step in, and that didn't end up, so basically the feud that should have really worked. I mean, it started great, they had a great match at Starrcade 88, and unfortunately, since they were only doing a few occasional pay-per-views, as opposed to a few too many pay-per-views, and they were doing the clashes and stuff like that, and they still had the syndicated TV, it didn't work out as it should have because there were too many chefs, not enough stew, too many cooks in the kitchen. Basically, everything was going all tits up and everything, and Eaton and Lane, as great as they were, working with Rose and Condrey, as great as they were, could only do so much when the people, behind the scenes weren't featuring them. And then Cornette and Heyman Paul Lee do their tuxedo match, and Eaton and Lane continue to make sporadic appearances. There's a Dynamic Dudes feud, but when Jim Herd came in, he, for whatever reason, didn't like the Dynamic Dudes, and he didn't like the Midnight Express. Because Jim Herd was a goddamn idiot when it came to not appreciating talent. And I will never fucking understand that. But the Dynamic Dudes feud, they end up turning heel. They actually took a couple months off because of George Scott and all that stuff, because they feuded with the Samoan SWAT team, and George Scott got fired. They worked in Continental for a little bit, and then that closed down. They came back and they worked in the U.S. Tag Title Tournament, put over the Freebirds, I believe, and then the Dynamic Dudes feud. They turn heel. They feud with Pillman and Zink, where it's supposed to end up with Pillman having, a singles push and having his throat injured, and they talk about all the injuries and the throat surgeries he had. And then Pillman and Zink end up, losing the U.S. Tag Titles at Capital Combat 90. That was supposed to be the rise Brian Pillman, and Eaton and, Lane made Zank look like $1 million goddamn dollars, because Zank looked great in an 8x10 and he was adequate in the ring, but Pillman was really the star. But Eaton, if you had a series of matches with Eaton and Pillman, as far as like over the TV title or something, you would have had money right there, because Eaton could have worked with anybody. Then Cornette and Lane left, at Halloween Havoc 1990, and then we get into Eaton being a single star. So all this time, he was a single star when he started, and then he teamed up with, various incarnations and everything, and teamed up with Condrey. Condrey left, teamed up with Lane, and then Lane and Cornette left due to disputes, and basically Oldie saying, well, if you don't like it, go home. Bobby Eaton was so well respected that he got a contract extension, a boost in pay or something like that. I think it was like $175,000 a year for 2 years. And, he, as you would understand, Dusty Rhodes, I think Dusty Rhodes just came back to the company and was like, hey, we need to keep Bobby Eaton, because Bobby Eaton's really goddamn good. He did a whole lot, he drew a whole lot of money with me, baby. But in all seriousness, Bobby Eaton was so well respected. Outside of a couple stints where, he was away from WCW for a brief time, he worked there from 91 to 2000. And just, that shows the amount of respect that he had. Again, all the people that talk about just how nice he was. He beat Arn for the TV Championship at Super Brawl 1991. The debut of Kevin Nash as Oz. Wait, no, that was Wrestle War. No, it was Super Brawl. That'll put butts in seats. And he lost the TV title to Austin, and Austin would end up having a pretty long TV championship run, because Stunning Steve Austin and Bobby Eaton having a series of matches over that would have been nice. Then, shock of shocks, Bobby Eaton turns heel, joins the Dangerous Alliance, managed by Paul E. Dangerously. It's Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, Rick Rude, Arn Anderson, and Stunning Steve Austin. Because all the championship pedigree, Medusa was in their corner, who was tougher than most of the guys, and that's no disrespect to any of the people there, but Medusa was legit tougher than a lot of people there. And, he won the tag titles with Arn, being that they were friends. That's a hell of a goddamn tag team. How could you not appreciate, even after all the years they've had, Arn and, Bobby Eaton as a tag team? They beat Steamboat and Dustin, and, in sometime in 92. And then, there were a few shifts around everything. There was the Dangerous Alliance versus Sting's Squadron, which was Sting, Dustin, the Steiners, Pillman? Was Pillman the other one? I'm trying to remember if Pillman was the other one. Yes, the Dangerous Alliance. Larry Zbyszko accidentally hits Bobby Eaton with some kind of rod. He hits him with his rod. Gross. And Eaton ends up losing because Eaton's injured. And Zbyszko gets kicked out of Dangerous Alliance, and then Dangerous Alliance dissolves because Bill Watts didn't like Paul Heyman. And you know why. Even though Heyman can't talk about it, those stories are floating out there. So, Watts basically let him go due to budget cuts and stuff like that, because they were spending a whole lot of money. I don't know why he decided to fire Bobby Eaton, as good as Eaton was, but Bill Watts was kind of insane at that point. So he did bounce around to a few places. He wrestled in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, reuniting, so to speak, with Jim Cornette. Had a variation of the TV championship, beat the champ, and Bobby Eaton was a perfect guy for that. How could you not get a great series of matches out of Bobby Eaton? The great work, the territorial experience that he had. I have seen a few of the matches that he had in Smoky Mountain. A few of them are floating around on YouTube. And I mean, I don't care that he'd been wrestling since '76. It looked like he hadn't missed a goddamn beat. He was fucking great. And then he does come back he does have some New Japan runs in '93. Teams with the future, Ludwig Borga. Poor Bobby Eaton. Poor, beautiful Bobby Eaton. And then he has another one in '94 and then '95. That was part of the partnership with WCW, because they had, once Bischoff got into some power after Watts pretty much went insane, Bischoff had reestablished a working relationship with New Japan, and Bobby Eaton was a perfect guy to go over there to work with their talent and just be a great representation of tremendous wrestling, because back then especially, New Japan was all about the work rate, all about the star power. Yeah, you had the flashiness and everything with Jushin Thunder Liger and the Great Muta, but you had great talent, and Bobby Eaton could hang with any of them even after almost 2 decades in wrestling. And then he was back in WCW by '93, and teamed with Benoit until Benoit went back to New Japan. He teamed with Steve Keirn, Fabulous Express Ones. That didn't work at all. Had an appearance in ECW, a couple of appearances. Teamed with Sabu against Arn and Terry Funk, which I've actually seen that match. It was just so bizarre to see that. Then pretty much his last any kind of run was with the Blue Bloods as Earl Robert Eaton, with Lord Steven Regal and Squire Dave Taylor. Why was he a squire? Don't know. But there were vignettes where he was being trained to be a proper gentleman, and they feuded with Nasty Boys, and unfortunately only made one appearance on pay-per-view, but that was on opposite sides of teams in the Lethal Lottery at Slamboree '96. They had TV matches, and they were great TV matches. How could you not appreciate Lord Steven Regal and Earl Robert Eaton, beautiful Bobby and Regal teaming up? How could you not appreciate that? Dave Taylor, very underappreciated worker. And Eaton, at that point, fit in perfectly. And once they disbanded, though, he was kept on the books for a few years, but he was just wrestling on WCW Saturday Night and Worldwide and the syndicated shows and stuff like that. He would pick up some wins, but he was mostly just there to be the kind of guy that would put, newer people over, and it made sense. And at that point, Eaton, he was established as being one of the best, and he was, I don't know if he was more than happy to do it, but it's like he was all about business, because I'm not in his head, but I would imagine a man like that would understand, got to get the other people ready. And he was still getting paid pretty well. And then he was finally released in 2000. And then from there, he had sporadic appearances. They had a new Midnight Express that they tried to have that didn't really work. And then he teamed with Dennis Condrey and Stan Lane, sporadic appearances and stuff like that. Dennis Condrey ended up having his cancer issues. Stan Lane really wouldn't wrestle all that much. Sporadic appearances and stuff like that. And then he had health issues and, had a pacemaker put in and stuff like that. And unfortunately did pass away on August 4th, just yesterday. And very late yesterday. But the legacy of Bobby Eaton, and I mean, I probably could have gone through a whole bunch of other matches and stuff like that and everything, and I apologize if I skipped over anything, but the legacy that Bobby Eaton left is a hell of a legacy. I mean, I am so appreciative of men like Bobby Eaton, talents like Bobby Eaton that understood tag team wrestling psychology, understood wrestling psychology, the little nuances. Watching him was poetry in motion. The Alabama Jam, he would float. Ric Flair worked with him when he was booking WCW for a bit. Let's see, he did work with him. It was sometime after he was done booking, but I would think it was like May 7th, 1990. TV appearance, and he wrestled him on the final WCW big event that Ric Flair appeared for before jumping to WWE, because Jim Herd was an idiot. Clash of Champions in June of '91. 2 out of 3 falls for the World Heavyweight Championship, NWA World Heavyweight Championship. It was kind of in a flux at that point, but Eaton won the first fall, lost the next 2 falls to Flair. But Flair respected him. Austin respected him. So many people respected him, and just I feel so bad for his children. him losing his wife and then passing away so soon after. I don't know the cause of death. I'm not going to speculate on that. But could have been a broken heart. It's really sad. It really, really is sad. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. You know what? I'm not even going to do that. I'm not even going to do that. Rest in peace, Bobby Eaton. You will be sorely missed. You will never be forgotten. One of the best ever, and one of the all-time greats, and he will be sorely missed. Rest in peace.